Now let's change our track a bit and focus on how digital barriers are blurring, ultimately enabling companies, clients, and people in general to communicate and engage in previously impossible ways. Our upcoming panel discussion featuring Matthew Lindbergdashwork, technologist, compliance specialist, and DA for insurance companies at Lindbergdashwork, and Ryan Thayer, the co-founder of NextName, will emphasize how blurring digital lines enable unprecedented levels of interaction and engagement between companies, clients, and people in general. And to help us extract the most from this session, we have Jon Arnold, the principal analyst at J Arnold Associates, with us. Let's go ahead and give them all a big round of applause.
So at this point, I think a lot of people here are pretty familiar with each other. So Matthew, you've spoken already, I'm pretty sure. And Ryan, I don't think I've seen you speak yet. Nope, not yet. But you're here. Okay. So we had a third speaker lined up. Mona Golden Brown, but apparently she had to leave last minute. So it's just us. But we will have plenty to talk about. So as you know, the topic today is Metaverse, and that means a lot of things. And we've heard a lot of references to it already over these days here, especially the last session. They touched on quite a few things that are relevant to this. So we can approach Metaverse from a lot of angles, but I'm going to kind of structure this with a few different things. So just so people know, we all come from different walks of life and disciplines. I'm a technology analyst, so I have been doing this about 20 years, and I follow a lot of trends like this pretty extensively. So I work closely with a lot of the vendors in the industry, and I write a lot, I speak a lot, I go to a lot of industry events. So we have a pretty good handle on what's happening now. And Metaverse proposes a lot of really interesting challenges for certainly in the business world. The consumer world, the gaming world, I think is where a lot of this stuff lives. But one of the things I like to say, and people who want to think about the future, which is of course coming real fast, is in the world of enterprise technology and how organizations adapt new technologies and how they evolve and keep their customers happy, keep their employees happy. One of the mantras that I follow and share is that consumers lead, enterprises follow. Okay, and I think what that means is the trends you see consumers adopting today in the consumer world. The Apples of the world are bringing great tools and technology. The stuff they're doing and using is, generally speaking, pretty far ahead of what enterprises are able to support for their own workforce. So there's a bit of a gap. And Metaverse is one of these examples of something that's gaining a lot of traction amongst consumers. And when I say consumers, what I really mean are digital consumers, right? Kids, people who are generally under 30, who have grown up with internet their whole lives. These things are very native to them. When you get inside large organizations, and I know a lot of you have been there, the decision-making, the thinking, the mentality around technologies is very different. And it tends to be very kind of hardware centric, and something that is so virtual like the Metaverse raises a lot of, I think challenges, but there are opportunities. So I'm going to position this with basically 4 themes, guys, and we'll kind of talk around them all. So first, we want to set the table, maybe a few definitions. Let's try to explain what we think the Metaverse is. That's a pretty fluid concept, but we got to kind of set some vocabulary here so we are talking about the same thing. And the next piece is, this is what makes it go, which is NFT, right? Non-fungible tokens. We've already heard a bit about this today, but that's kind of the oil and oxygen that makes the Metaverse actually, worth doing. And then we'll talk a bit about some of the examples that we're seeing out there today. And then of course, where it's going. The Metaverse is still a very futuristic concept, but there's things we think about today based on what we can do. And then there's the stuff that's going to come when our kids are running the world. And that's not too far off, right? Okay, so if we could get started then, I want us to, each of you guys give us your take on what you see as what the Metaverse might be, because there are multiple types of platforms. But before we do that, I just want to preface this because the Metaverse just didn't pop up overnight, right? The things we've been using that kind of get us to the metaverse from the physical world, right? We've all been using these things for many years, variations of the kind of the big three, VR, AR, and MR, right? Virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. So maybe we can start the conversation, guys. Let's talk a bit about first, those worlds are well established and understood, but they're kind of the building blocks to get us to even imagine what metaverse could actually be. So let's talk a little bit about that. Ryan, what are your thoughts on where those technologies are and how they've kind of created a bit of a bridge to what we call the metaverse?
Yeah, so I think really what we've seen over the past 10 to 15
You guys
years.
hear? Sorry, I just want to interrupt, but I want to make sure you can be heard.
Can you guys hear me now? There it is. Yeah, so really what I think we've seen over the last 10 to probably more than 10 to 15 years is kind of the advancement of technology and really across the board and within the metaverse and kind of augmented mixed reality, virtual reality. Right now, we're really seeing the application of that technology to real world use cases. So one example, kind of thinking about mixed reality is for different sports, I think that, so there's this one company called Win Reality. And what this company does is essentially it's a baseball swing simulator. So it allows different athletes, baseball, softball, to kind of practice their sport using a virtual reality headset. What it does is essentially replicates a pitch or an in-game moment for the athlete. And what that does is allow the athlete to practice that while they could be in the comfort of their own home, garage, wherever it may be. But really what that does is it expands the utility of that application and creates an opportunity for the athlete to practice, enhance, and develop themselves without requiring that true physical moment where you might require 10 other players to play a game or something like that. They can really do it in the comfort of their own home with just themselves and their virtual reality or augmented reality.
Chime in a bit. Sorry, let's see. Wow. Okay. Maybe it's switch. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, John. Ryan covered some of what we've already been experiencing in different sectors, for example, sports, with mixed reality applications being used right now by actual customers, consumers, professionals, to pursue their craft, pursue their vocation. And John was introducing his concept of where we start with definitions. So I have a somewhat of a definition, just for my own thinking of metaverse. And to me, metaverse is a technology. It's a technology similar to reading and writing, similar to mathematics, as a way of communicating and representing the world. And there's the physical world, like we can write dictionaries, we can write encyclopedias. And then there's the world of the imagination. There's novels, there's stories, there's plays. Those are communicated using the technology of the written word. And we have mathematics, which can be expressed in the language of music, things like that. And so there's reality as it is given to us and reality as we create it. And this is what the metaverse is unlocking, huge potential creativity. And what's unknown is what the limits are, because we're still just beginning.
Just to illustrate what is right next door to this hotel, this resort, is an e-gaming venue. And you know, electronic sports is something we always kind of thought of, all your kids play in the basement and nothing happens. But that form of, you know, sports, I'm old school guy, so, but you know, 2D versus 3D engagement has become so popular. You know, what I hate to say it, but what was virtual it becomes real because that's what people are doing. And there's a sense of reality to, gaming that's done virtually, that's so big that they have professional leagues for it. So, money talks, that's been brought up a few times already. With follow the money, that's where the opportunity generally finds itself. And when you see that level of acceptance, yes, that's great for validating esports, but it's also, again, paving the way for Metaverse, because things that seem so far away are much closer than we thought, right? I mean, Metaverse, as we call it, you remember Second Life, for example, you've heard of that one, right? I don't think anyone here would know Pulveria. I'm probably the only one in the room who knows that one. But another one would be Web Alive, which is in the enterprise world that Avaya had at one point. Anyways, these virtual worlds, aren't new. But maybe, and you guys have seen a lot of this stuff too. Maybe talk a bit about what's changed in the last 10 years that made those kind of first generation virtual worlds where they are, and how the metaverse is starting to look today. And that to me helps, I think, make that concept real. Because I think a lot of us have seen Second Life, right? Does that sound familiar? And maybe kind of what we had then and what do we have now?
Yeah, so I think if we look back and look at video games got to hold it closer. Yeah, so I think if we look back to video games and just using that as an example from 15 years ago, back when, they were much simpler. It's not as interactive, where you're really just, you're not as involved in the game. You might just be playing a character or just not really actually a part of the game, where now in recent, with the metaverse and new technology, gamers and users are able to get much more involved and interactive with the game, where they can really be fully immersed in that environment, which creates a totally different, unique experience for these players. And really that is starting to create a huge shift where in not just applications in gaming, but applications in healthcare, education, things like that, where that's really where the metaverse is going, and that immersive experience where someone's able to get involved and really kind of feel like they are a part of the game as opposed to just playing it. It's two different constructs where on the one hand you have someone who's playing a game and they don't really feel as invested into it. Whereas if you can kind of become fully immersed in that environment, whether it's putting on a virtual reality headset or something of the sort, it really creates a much better experience for the user. And right now the applications in video games and things like that are pretty basic, I think. But they are consumer facing technology, which really money talks. And that's right now where money consumers can quickly buy a game and be interested in it. Whereas some other applications in healthcare and education, that sales process and the timeline is much longer for that to really be developed and for that use case to really be able to be utilized.
So Matthew, I like how you described the metaverse, and I want to make a kind of a shift from Ryan, where you were talking about where the gaming companies, EA Sports, etc., those virtual worlds have been created by private companies for their products, right? They're singular experiences. But metaverse is like the internet, right? No one really owns it, right? It could be any way you want it. So maybe could you distinguish a bit more of how you would see the difference, Matthew, from the gaming world to, as you said, those privately created environments to something as you say, is meta. What's the meta in metaverse, right?
All right. Yes. So just coming from personal experience, I have friends and family members who are very involved in gaming, and I have sat in on tournaments with them and seen how amazing it is. For me personally, it's easier to go to a library and pull out a book. Just the tactile real world is easier for me to relate to. But other people have different types of imagination. And so making that leap to being there in the virtual environment is so much easier. And there's all sorts of different segments of people. And some people just want to get work done. Some people want to get work done as a game. and they're just as productive as the people who don't need it to be a game. And so, as John says, the metaverse is just similar to the internet. It's a way to interact in multiple domains, not just gaming, which has a fixed rule set, and the opportunity to win, lose, have a quest, have an experience, go back. But the metaverse is an open system where one particular environment connects to another environment, connects to another environment. And so I'm just going to do a quick little demonstration here. I'll want to touch on it again. To me, thinking of actors on a stage is very handy. And so we always talk about how there's a fourth wall. And every now and then, like in the play Hamlet, Hamlet goes and talks to the audience. So he's breaking the fourth wall. And in the metaverse space, the fourth wall that's happening the quickest is where money talks, where we can reach out and give and take with our wallets. And as some of the panelists were talking yesterday, there's all these data points in e-commerce, in web analytics, that all connect back to an individual consumer, individual business person's wallet, and their autonomy and ability to control that is basically what all these companies doing this web analytics are getting at. So the metaverse is a way to make being in the new future internet economy fun.
It is at stake.
Right. Yeah, and I think I can add just one more little piece to that. So one of the biggest differences that I see with a typical video game and something like the metaverse is that a video game is, like Josh said, is it's created by it's private development with a fixed set of rules. So it's not as customizable. There's some games, I think like Minecraft, for example, where you can get out and kind of go choose to do whatever, and it's a very open-ended world. But a lot of games have a fixed set of rules, and the user can't really go out and do whatever they want. They're limited to whatever has been developed in the game. And really what the metaverse allows us to do is it creates an opportunity for many people to all kind of get in the sandbox and build something together. It might not be connected to every other thing that's created, but it's all in the same domain.
So there's kind of a gold rush mentality right now around this, right? I mean, metaverse is just a concept, but what makes it real is having a place to go to, right? It's like when the internet first came around in the early 90s, people wondered, well, what am I going to do? There's nothing there. And look what it is today, right? No one really thought it would amount to much of anything, right? And I think this is the same story all over again, right? There is nothing there now. That's the gold rush, right? And that's where the NFTs come in to enable a digital form of currency so you can buy and sell and trade and build and create, right? Because there has to be something to drive it. And NFT, my understanding is that is what makes it viable. So maybe what's your take on that? How do you see NFT supporting the evolution?
Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I co-founded a company called NextName, and really what we are is an NFT marketplace for college athletes, founded with the new name, image, and likeness laws that came out in July of 2021. Athletes are now able to profit off the sale of their name, image, and likeness, which in the past they weren't able to do. And so what we've done is created these NFTs, terming them digital collectibles. Think of it like a trading card so think of it like a digital trading card or NFTs for these athletes. And what you can do is what we're looking at developing is creating some sort of video game, sports video game for whatever sport, whether it's our football athletes, our basketball, volleyball, golf. And so when you buy one of these NFTs, that provides you with that digital asset in the game, while also providing you with some real world benefits.
Yeah. That's very much on the ground, and you're creating value for these athletes. This is something that would probably be very difficult without this technology.
Yeah, it's one of the most challenging, biggest issues that we faced since launching our company is, and I think the broader NIL industry is that when an athlete sells their name, image, and likeness, with the transaction that takes place needs to be fair market value. So typically, a lot of schools or athletes would engage in a pay-to-play scenario where the athlete just receives a big sum of money and then goes to that school. Whereas in this scenario, when you're buying a digital collectible, and that's the use case of the NFT, is that there's limited quantity, and it's think of it like Tom Brady rookie card. Now, if you have that card today, that's a lot more valuable than just any rookie off the street. So that collectible is really what helps create value and hold value for the athletes. And it creates an opportunity for the athlete to sell something without them putting in a lot of effort and work to make that fair market value transaction happen.
To me, it seems like being staked in the gold rush. You're a miner and someone gives you the money for the pickaxe and the coil of rope and the backpack, and you go out, and sometimes the person who staked you gets huge return, and sometimes you just got an adventure and got an education. So it's really awesome.
Yeah. So, again, like the internet, you're only going to stay there if there's something there. And I think that gold rush is about building the there to create it, because you're asking people to spend less time in the physical world, right? More time in this virtual world. There's got to be a good reason. It can be social, right? But when you think about some of the businesses a lot of people here might be in, we're trying to create that as another model for, right, delivering services or education, right? It can be social too, of course, but or games, which that's always going to do well. But there's so many other, I think, use cases. And when you mentioned about baseball, softball training, I think is a good example, right, where the virtual experience can approximate things that you can actually learn from and use in the physical world. Have you been around any other examples that you can cite that would be like metaverse friendly?
Future examples. So I'm lucky to have people share their ideas with me being their advisor. And the future of creativity is so wild that it takes time to bring it down to earth and find the customers and find the technology and make it all line up so that in the end it's magic. I do want to talk about NFTs. It's a store of value, and it's also collectible. And people want something that makes them feel proud. And there's always something new, better, faster, cheaper. So Ryan has an awesome market. It's an evergreen market. There's new recruits every year. And then what I want to talk about is how the metaverse technology, the conventional way of thinking about what a perfect metaverse might be. I'm just going to throw it out there. Maybe your idea of a perfect metaverse is different from mine. Is totally photorealistic, 5 dimensions, 3 dimensions plus time plus smell plus it's just the total immersive experience, like being on Fremont Street here in Las Vegas. That is like the pinnacle of what metaverse coding and programming can do, is create this sense of altered reality, almost being like gods. And yet at the same time, think of Dungeons and Dragons, the card game, and huge worldwide community. And yet people have these agreed rules of how they trade the collectible cards and do the games that are possible with the different combinations of cards. So just in my opinion, even a game like Dungeons and Dragons, even before the internet, is a form of metaverse. It's a shared reality that's different from conventional reality using technology to create it.
Right, so a lot of it's very decentralized. For the NFT folks, you know what a DAO is, right? Decentralized autonomous organization, right? So that concept, which is very different from, you know, fiat currency, right? Where there is a centralized authority that backs it and gives it value. And I think you're touching on something, Matthew. I think that is going to be a big difference between what we've done in the physical world, and that it is a very consensus-led kind of thing. There is no single authority that controls it. And I think that's part of the spirit of this. It drives people because everyone can contribute to making it not just good, but also, you know, safe and equitable and all that kind of stuff. So I think we're still seeing it very much in baby steps still, right? I mean, we don't have a centralized government or regulatory authority out there that's putting fences around us yet. It might come. We don't know. We don't know. But I also want to talk a bit about the technology because like a lot of things, you can be too early, you can be too late with these innovations. So a big challenge, and this is, I think, why Facebook, well, Meta, has kind of pulled back on some of what they're doing in this space, is the ideas, the concepts are exciting, and they're very promising, all this stuff people want to get into it. But one of the realities that it does hold us back is the devices that we use today, right? PC, mobile phones, tablets, they don't have the horsepower yet, right? To drive like an authentic, feeling, immersive, multi-sensory experience, right? We just don't have it yet. So companies like NVIDIA, I don't know how much you follow this stuff, but you know, they're kind of creating that next generation of processors, right? That can deliver the horsepower that these devices need. Or probably more likely, right? We're going to see a new class of devices that are going to evolve, that are built, purpose-built for these kind of needs, right? Because you say you want to go to a, you know, multi-dimensional experience, you just can't get it on a mobile phone, right? But someone somewhere, I'm sure, is working on the right technology to support this. Because without it, what like the headsets, you know, the Oculus, it's okay, it's fun, but that's not going to be the long-term solution. No one's going to want to wear a headset for more than an hour or two at a time. You just get a headache, it's too expensive, it's bulky. But those devices, this is where the innovation is exciting here. If we're talking about this topic of metaverse, if you're if you're in the technology world, this is the big opportunity because those devices haven't been created yet, or the next generation haven't come along yet, but they will. And that's, I think, the thing that's going to kind of jumpstart this to make it more mainstream.
Yeah, and I think, so I'll talk on that and then going back to your earlier point about other applications. So one thing that I think is going to be pretty prominent in the coming years, and it's going to take a while to develop, is in healthcare. Think about a surgery and how the human body reacts. What programmers and developers can do is essentially recreate a human body in the metaverse, in virtual reality, and create a system. It needs to be a very high-powered system to, accommodate every human brain runs our body, and we're going to have to figure out a computer that can emulate that and simulate that same experience where blood flow and everything is the same. Our body reacts in the same way as it does in the real world. And when you think about a surgeon who's practicing these procedures, they don't really get a chance to mess up. Say it's a highly critical procedure where if the surgeon messes up, something very bad could happen, patient could die, something like that. So when you create this virtual reality where it's very photorealistic, high sensory, and you can actually, as a doctor or as a student, you can get into that experience and step in and really get immersed in that environment and feel like you're performing a real surgery without the same level of risk.
All right, you're looking at me. Okay, that's okay because it goes like this. I'm looking at you. So we've got about 9-ish minutes left. So I just wanted to be mindful of time. So this is probably a good window to say if you've got questions, why don't you bring them up and let's keep the conversation going. Otherwise, we'll just keep throwing stuff back at you. So please, you're welcome to ask questions or add something. Well. Oh, maybe one. Yes, no, yes. He's the professional. He asks at every session. So good to have you here. Thank you.
Welcome. So I think probably, I mean, everyone here knows I would like to ask questions. So, I mean, I have heard different leaders, different CEO or CTO talk about the technology, the future, the vision, the improvements needed. So in your mind, right now, I mean, we are just the early stage in blockchain, or we are in early stage of AI. We are in early stage of robotics. So in your mind, how long does it take for us to have a mature technology for blockchain, for AI, or for robotics, and how to get to there?
All right. So one of our panelists couldn't make it today, Mona Golden Brown. And Mona was part of a session on robotics and related issues yesterday. She had a quote that stood out to me, relevant to your question. She said, AI is the brain of the robot. All these simple little gems of nuggets. And she had a lot more very sophisticated understandings to say, but just that little drop of info is something to go on. And do we need robots to behave exactly like a human? Now, in the case Ryan was mentioning, where you're doing a virtual surgical procedure, as close to identical to a human as possible is extremely valuable. Now, the function of a robot being a delivery bot that comes to your mailbox and puts the package in your mailbox, that doesn't need to have all the abilities that a human does. So I'm thinking about the very likelihood that some of the innovations in the metaverse space, in the convergence of, who was it? Kurzweil talked about the singularity, and a few other people. We don't necessarily need the singularity of artificial intelligence, robots, digital everything to get the benefits. No matter what the future is, no matter how fast it comes out to us, we can get the benefits now in our lifetimes. And so it's really, what do we want? What do we need as individual people and as a planetary species? So some of the things the metaverse can do for us is give us experiences that we couldn't. Like, there's beautiful mountains in Afghanistan, but I can't go hiking very easily on those mountains. But now with Google Earth, I can zoom in and virtually fly through the mountains, things like that. So I can't give a number of years because there's so many different things that different people want. But I know to get what people are working on now with the metaverse now, within 5 years, some extremely profitable and happy innovations will be very well established and very successful.
So in your mind, within 5 years, what is possible? So which industry would probably come out first?
Yeah, I think probably the first industry that we're really going to see start to break through is going to be video games and gaming, just because it's so consumer facing. Other industries, it's going to take a lot more time to actually for that technology to develop, and then for revenue to come back in once that technology is developed. It might take 5 to 10 years for applications in healthcare or banking or education to be developed. And after that 5-10 years of where it's finally developed, there's still a lag when you actually see revenue coming in the door. And so when you think about these consumer facing industries where you can bring it right out to a broad population and create a demand for something that the consumer is already pretty familiar with, and think of just a normal video game and now create a new experience for them. That's, I think, really where we're going to see the fastest shift.
Just to quickly add, to the last panel, one of the speakers talked about use cases. And I think that will drive the timeline for a lot of things. Until we have a kind of an acceptable, stable, fairly secure form of digital currency, and NFT might be it might not be, but you know, right now we're in a bad state for digital currency. So no one's really taking a lot of chances right now. And I think that is going to set back a lot of this stuff, because without that form of currency that allows people to, you know, have a reason to invest in building the virtual stores in the virtual world, etc. That take-up is going to be slow, but the use cases will drive it. There'll be industries, like you said, you know, it could be education, it could be government, that say, you know, this is a better way to do what we've been doing. Let's put some resources to developing it and try it. But nobody, you know, nobody knows what kind of acceptance we're going to have, except the gaming world. That they can't do anything wrong with the team. But they're onto something. Again, I said earlier, consumer leads, enterprises follow. So if you really want to nail down timeline, follow where the gamers are really innovating. What areas are they developing games in? Like what, you know, it's sports. It could be many other things though. That's a pretty good clue, because don't forget the decision makers of tomorrow are the gamers of today. So they're going to bring that with them when they're in a decision to invest in these technologies. Anyways, we're hitting the 2-minute warning here. So sir, what have you got to say or ask?
Yeah. So my question is about what the future entails based on your experience. If you look at it today, we're able to use EFT easily with, you know, education. Some of them with healthcare. You know, you can sit down here, the doctor can appear to you, and he can talk to you. So education is about, you know, we are in a virtual classroom, and all of us just, I will be in my house, and we'll be like we are all in the same room. But we want to take it a little bit further. And what else that furtherness? I met a very great mentor that when he's in the financial decision making, like a strategic area, they are, you know, when they say something, you know that these people really bring value to it. Now, saying that, we want to connect the AI to the future. Guess what? The guy's in about 4 different minutes. It can be in every minute, right? So now you will take his EFT, his profile, his idea of how he thinks, is already built in. So his profile is listening. It's not sitting down there, but his avatar is sitting down there. And you guys are discussing in the meeting. And then he comes in and he makes decision. And guess what? That decision matches his decision if it's actually sitting down there. That is something that we are thinking that we might be able to do. But I just want to hear your thoughts. How easy you think that might be, or how hard it might be? Thank you.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
All right. Just quickly, I was thinking of what I wanted to tell you all, and your question goes perfectly into that, is that programmers all the time, and I haven't been lucky enough to be a programmer, but I know they get extensive mathematics training, logic training, critical thinking, business systems. A programmer, even though we don't really think of it, is a form of a Renaissance person. And so programmers, when they are interfacing with developers, software developers, are taking on the role of looking at the business logic. And when you're developing a game or developing a software used by a company, the business logic is critical, what the process steps are, what the sequences are, where there's a stop, a pause, a change. And so this goes into the strategic thinking of one of those people, a man or a woman with experience, with a reputation, with the freedom of ability to come into different companies, board of directors, advisory meetings. That person can say, here is the system, follow the system, you'll have success. So those thought leaders, those inspiration peoples, they have a brand. That's their image. That's how they look on a book cover. That's a brilliant idea. It's practically an NFT idea, the avatar. But I'm going to pull it back a step further in that there's multi-metaverses. Each metaverse, like John was saying, is created by the consensus of the people in it. And if enough people in a particular metaverse don't like the rules, don't like the limitations, or they want limitations that are different from the limitations that are there, they can go and join a different metaverse. And that's only possible based on who the programmers are, how skilled the programmers are at making the business logic to bring the environment through that acts like magic, that meets people's expectations, where the game is fair or unfair, depending on how people want to be challenged and succeed. So that you might even have a metaverse that's branded by the avatars of the people whose thoughts structured the rules of that metaverse.
Cool. This is like the World Cup, guys. I can see we're in bonus time now. I just want to add a couple of quick thoughts to that. So what you brought up there, a lot of what you said can be done now in the world of AR and VR. They can. But where I think the metaverse takes it to another level, the idea that you can be in multiple places at once. It's starting to sound like quantum computing, but the idea is that with those avatars or digital personas, right? You could create distinct ones that maybe only reflect a certain part of your personality or your expertise, right? Like I'm a musician, I could have my musical digital persona. I'm a cook, I have my culinary, and you could have them all doing things at the same time in multiple places, which would be really cool because now you can have these multiple levels of experience, contiguously, and then you might have a reason why you want to do all those particular things, and you can bring those personas back together into your little virtual world and amalgamate all of that knowledge, which is not humanly possible because you can only be in one place at one time right now. So there's another concept you mentioned, singularity. So there's another concept called digital twin, right? And there's another one called Centaur AI. These are more forward-thinking things that are more about AI, but the metaverse is where a lot of this stuff is going to live, right? Where you can basically pair yourself, not just with the other versions of yourself, but other versions of other people who are also in your metaverse and sharing similar ideas. So this idea that we can kind of, not even bifurcate, but just kind of like spread out all these places and multiple metaverses. This is getting really out of space, but it just shows you what's possible. But this is all about, you have to be able to think this way. If we think linearly, like now we're in one time, in one place, face to face, that's okay. That's how we've existed. But this is a whole new world, this metaverse thing, right? Where so many of these things are possible that we can't do here in the physical world. That's what makes the virtual world kind of interesting, but kind of scary at the same time, for better or worse, right? All right, so I think we're on time. We're getting the look. So, okay, you tell me, do we turn ourselves off? We're done.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.